chocolate cake.
I walked in the bar, I didn't see
It was good. We were there.
I'd like to call the meeting of September 17th, 2019, the second budget public hearing to order. First agenda item is some introductory remarks from Sherry.
Hi, thank you. Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, citizens that are attending this evening, this is the final public hearing to set and adopt the final budget for this year. And as you recall, the development and review of the budget for this year for 2020 and 21 began in February. It was on the 28th of February in a work session that staff sat and listened to the commissioners talk about things you wanted us to focus on for this new upcoming budget. Over the course of those next several months, we spent the time continuing to listen to the various things the board was having to address at their meetings, and also we began to meet with the departments as they came forward with their request. As you also know now, this is the first year we asked the departments to come forward with their results-based request for their budget, and we're holding them accountable for the types of things they requested over the year. We want to thank the board for allowing us to present all this. And before our CFO, Jan Brewer, gets up, I just wanted to mention that, it's been a pleasure presenting this first budget, the balanced budget, which is one of the requirements of the county administrator, bringing this forward to the citizens. There's a lot to review, and I want to reassure you that we have looked at all the different angles. We have come back to you in July once the official budget the tentative millage was set, and we have addressed any additional funds. Early on in the budget process, we asked you to stick with us on what we're providing to you, and we asked you because, as you've heard, we have a large increase of people to address. A lot of our budget this year is based on increasing service level, and especially in our public safety area with the sheriff and our public safety department, and in some forward-facing departments in order to keep up with the demand. We haven't been able to do that in many years, and we think our citizens deserve to have that quality level of service. Throughout the month of August, you heard the capital improvement plan. You also heard from your largest departments, the utilities department, and again, Public Works, and how we address those forward-facing projects that are in your capital improvement plan. And we met with each of you to review the infrastructure sales tax projects and capital improvement plan projects to make sure we were addressing the needs of the citizens. So I would like to turn it over to Jan Brewer, and we've asked Jan, you've had some additional questions here in the last few weeks about various areas related to our budget proposal, including reserves and the different departments that those represent. And tonight, Jan's going to begin by going through those particular areas. I'd ask you to, and remind you to, as I said last week, that even though we budgeted $19.2 million out of the $37.2 million in budget requests, we weren't able to meet everyone's needs. But again, this was the first year we were able to address all the constitutional officers' requests and to support the sheriff on some of the additions they needed. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to Jan.
Good evening, Commissioners. We placed on your on the dais, we kind of augmented the PowerPoint presentation. After some conversations we've had, my team helped me out, and first may I introduce my team to you. They have done an excellent job. As we go through what we'd like to do, some of it is familiar from what you've seen before, and then I thought we'd walk through a little bit more. So Jamie, if we could go ahead and start. You've seen this slide before. This represents your property values over time. One thing that you can see, though, we added the population changes between the years. And what's really interesting about this is that there is a 26.2% growth in population, but the value you receive has only grown by 12%. So it kind of goes in line with what we were saying, that Save Our Homes is somewhat capped the ability for it to grow, and most of your items are coming from growth. Moving on to the next one, this one represents the total millage rates over time, and it's very important to look that especially during the falling times when your growth overall, your property values had really dipped in 2013, your millage remained the same. And it is recommended to remain the same this year as well. And this amount includes not only the countywide, but the voted debt, which now is expired, and the overall unincorporated MSTU. So on this slide, it defines those so for the audience at home, in the left column are the adopted millage rates from the prior year. In the second column are the tentative rates that are before you tonight. And again, no change. We wanted to illustrate this one again especially for your audience. We call it the bubble chart. So on the top half of this chart are property taxes. And what this does is it compares like-sized counties or our neighboring counties to us as far as our structure. So are we collecting property taxes in the same manner as everyone else? You can see Manatee County is red, and you can see we only have the 3 dots within the property tax area. The second half of this sheet represents other taxes, and these are opportunities that are given to you by the state of Florida within the statutes, and Manatee County now has another dot where the infrastructure sales tax is. You're in your 3rd year. The voters helped us pass that tax, and it's approximately $27 million a year, with 70% of it going to your overall transportation. So as you can see, we're still not quite the same as our neighbors or the neighbors to our north or our south, but we are trying to fill in the gaps. And as you did today, you had a discussion on stormwater utility, and that's one of the options you have as well. Okay, now this is nothing in my mind but visual noise, and I'm not going to make you go through this because it is just an amazing amount of numbers. This, though, I do want to let you know and just say, this is required by the state of Florida. You will see this every year. It is in Florida statute 200.0653L, and it's regulated especially in section 129033B. Every city, county, and taxing district has to produce this chart. And it must be published. It's by the TRIM specifications, and if we do not publish this and do it appropriately, you absolutely can lose your millage. But the beauty of this is that with governmental accounting, Florida statutes wanted to make sure you can compare one county to the other. So it's in a prescribed format. So let me break it down so it's a little bit easier to get. So Jamie, if you could go forward too, because that's a 2-page slide. So basically, that sheet that you had in front of you does 2 things. It lists all your sources of revenue, and it lists all you're going to do with that revenue. So going forward, you have 2 things that are under here. Jamie, can you click? It's not allowing me. You have revenues anticipated and cash carry forward. Please move forward. Expenses will be under uses and reserves. So there's your 4 categories. 2 types, 4 categories. Keep going, Jamie. So in the budget you have right now, again, one more click. You have $995 million of recurring revenue. So that's the first piece. The second piece is how much cash do you have on hand to put into this? This is what is unique about governmental accounting. Governmental accounting is completely different than private accounting. Private accounting is governed by FASB board, FASB. They tell them how to do their audit, they tell them how their statements will work and how it will go. You are governed by a governmental accounting standards board. Totally different board, but your auditors have to maintain to those rules. So in the governmental world, what we're doing is bringing in the cash we have available and the appropriated projects. So let's stop right there, and Jamie, if you can hit it forward 1, I want to focus on that $868 million. So when we did this budget, we estimated that on 9/30, 2 weeks from now, we would end up with roughly $868 million of cash that we need to put in this budget. So you're putting all your savings account inside of it. Now, that appropriated projects cash, remember how we keep telling you that you have construction projects that have not been completed, there's $321 million right there. That's both the governmental side and the utility system. So how do I know if we're close? So Jamie, if you could go to the next one. This is a sample of your July 31st interim statements that is placed by the clerk's office. So if you're looking at the highlighted line, the cash and investments, I'm not taking out any liabilities, I'm saying what cash do I have? I have $1 billion. So how do I know it's going to go to $868 million? This is, remember, this is July, you have 2 months to go. So if I look, how did I do last year? So on 2018, Jamie hit it twice. You will see that on July 31st, last year, at the same time, you had $827 million. But by the time you got to September 30th, which is the second circle to the right, you had gone down to $748 million. And there's a reason for that. So Jamie, if you click one more, at the bottom down there, in 18, we went down $128 million in a couple of months. And I'm anticipating the difference is going to be $179 million in a couple of months, in between 7/31 and 9/30. How does that happen? If you click forward, Jamie. This is an example of how your governmental cash looks through the year. So if you start on the green on the far left in September of 2016, that's your audited statement. When they do interim statements in February, the cash flies up all the way to almost $500,000. That's because all your ad valorem is collected at that point. Then you can see the lines going down and as you go to the right until you get to the next audited statement in September of 17. You have lived off that cash that whole time, and then it dips down. Same pattern repeats in 18 of the next year. So if someone stands before you in February and says you have a lot of cash, you do, because you've got every penny that you're collecting in ad valorem at that point, but you're living off of it for the rest of the year. So Jamie, if you go forward. So in the budget before you, this is what we projected as cash coming in and revenues anticipated. That is your total budget, $1,864,000. So on the uses, you have expenditures planned of $1,024,800. So where are you going to end up? The difference, you're going to end up with a reserve of $517.8 million. And then again, there is your projects for capital of $321 that will be spent. I placed it down there because I'm trying to lump it together. So, having said that, the one we want to look for, if you move forward, is $517. That's your available cash. That's your reserve. So what's in your reserves? In your reserves, here are the different funds that you have. They're listed by type. There are different colors of money inside of governmental accounting. For example, you cannot take impact fees to pay public safety salary. You cannot take water fees and pay the sheriff for more deputies. You are allowed by Florida statute to collect funds for different methods. So each of these are a different, if you would say, checking account, and you have to identify those. One of the clerk's roles is Mr. Wolfson is not going to let me pay impact fees to go buy a vehicle as a maintenance item. There's no way he will do it. That is their function. So if you go to try to spend something in the wrong thing, they are the counter check so that you cannot. So the point of this is to show there's $517.8 million. These are all the different types of colors of money. So if we start at the bottom, Civic Center, Transit, and Stormwater, if we take those out, because we can agree you can't spend that money on public safety. Solid waste cannot be spent on public safety. You have capital projects for utilities, impact fees for utilities of $51 million, and water wastewater overall of $84 million. Those are their reserves. Internal service has $53 million. Capital projects that are designated for certain items are 9.4, The debt service right there of 54.6, I'll talk about on the next slide, but that 54.6 is your crossover bond. Remember, you had to issue money and you're going to pay it in a couple years, but you had to hold on to it. So you can't use that money to go pay for deputies. You have special revenue, that would be the tourist tax, the building fund, all these items that you're collecting for those. Impact fees, under no circumstance can we pay an operating expense for that. And then you have monies collected specifically for transportation, whether through gas taxes or whether through the millage. So that leaves you down to the general fund, which can be used for anything. And that leaves you down to the very first one, which is 84.1. Now, this is showing you the color of money. So although we have $517.8 million in reserves, the color of it that can be spent for anything is 84.1, which is the general fund. Now, let's flip the view. This is the view divided with your 20% out of there. So in the first column, you have the total amount of reserves. Second column, you're taking out the 20% by resolution that you have. So then what is in other in the third column? So if we start at the bottom, in solid waste, actually, Commissioner Benak, you said it earlier today, there's your $36.3 million that's closure. That's beyond your 20%. In the middle column, going up, that 23.7, that's your health insurance fund. Your health insurance fund, because you are a self-insured health insurance fund, that holds your dental, your medical, and for your retirees. Moving up, you can see the debt service of 51.2 beyond the operations. That is your crossover bond repayment. That's due in a couple of years that you have to pay that back. Moving up to 0.7, that's in parks, and I'll show you that in just a second. And that's Charlie set aside for his beach concession and also for Pope Golf. And finally, the largest one up there, well, next to the largest, is the highway special. Now, that is all the funding that you set aside for Chad. That's the right-of-way for $500,000. That's the contracted shell for $250,000. That you also set aside some traffic timing and a video wall. Total of that coming to $1.1 million. The disaster fund you established for the general fund is at 6.5. That's that one set aside. So if we take the first column and we go ahead and pull out the 20% reserves, we move a column over and pull out all of those that I just said, that leaves you stabilization, which is your far right column. That's where all your funding is. So again, starting at the bottom, you cannot use stormwater money for general obligations. You cannot use wastewater. You collected that money for fees. And internal service is your fleet, is what that one is at. So really that leaves you at the top with three types: general, highway special, and special revenue. And the key to remember there, if you hit one more, Jamie, that totals $45.5 million. So let's translate that into millage and where it's at. So if you go one forward, we provided for you, and Commissioner Baugh had said this, so I hope this meets it, because we provided for you by fund, and then we listed the departments that are associated with that fund. So on this sheet that I'm looking at now, if we start at the bottom, because it's 45.5, we move to special revenue. The other special revenue there, which is identified on this sheet, also is tourist tax, building fund, phosphate severance. For example, building fund this year is at 4.7. It has no stabilization next year because you reduce the fees and you're eating into that fund and it's lowering.
Oh, my goodness.
So now you get down to your millages. So in the unincorporated MSTU, you have stabilization. Again, that's beyond your 20%, beyond what you set aside. You have 2.1 million. In parks, you have 1 million. Children's Services has none. And library has 3.4. Now, in library, one thing I want to point out is that you've been planning for expansion of a library. So as your ad valorem has gone up, you've chosen not to spend it. You'll hold on to it, and when that recurring money comes in, you will put an FTE against it at some point. Right now, you're using that money and collecting it in order to take care of the building when you get there for the incidentals within. But I think what we all can agree, those are very minimal millages, very tiny, and any shift in those will have impact on each of those funds. Moving up to the next section, transportation only receives 0.2536 of the millage. Currently, it has 8.1 in stabilization. But with the CIP and overall plans, that will go down over the next 2.5 years. So the second one under there that has stabilization is gas taxes, but those are designated specifically for what the gas tax says. And Mr. Wolfen is makes me very honest with the gas taxes. You have to use them for what the statute says. So that leaves the general fund. That's the largest millage, 5.2942, and you have stabilization of 17.9 million. So then the next question is, what departments are using that specific? Although you can use it for any department, if you roll forward, Jamie, the general fund millage right there at the top has the rate and the stabilization of 17.9. I pulled this directly from your budget by fund in your department budget book. This shows all of the expenses for the departments that are within the general fund, just their expenses, not transfers, not anything else, just expenses. So within it, you can see, and if you click one more, I kind of summarized it to the right. The sheriff is 52.7% of $271 million worth of expenses you pay every year. Now that includes not only what you pay him, but what you're doing to upkeep the jail. So it's the two together. He's roughly around, I believe, 132 million, Neil? Around 132, 133. The remainder of that is what you have to pay for to upkeep the jail and also the inmate medical. Other constitutionals represent 10.2, public safety at 11.7, and other departments at 25.5. So of the 17 million you have beyond your 20% and beyond your disaster fund, if anything develops in any of these departments that you have to do, or the recession comes back through, that is what you would rely on, is that stabilization fund. So to reiterate, Jamie, if you go forward for me, I've proven to you that the money that is in the budget are the revenues anticipated and the cash in the interim statements. At the bottom of this piece of paper explains we're spending $1 billion, and the real key to it, Jamie, if you go forward, is that 517.8. That's a lot of cash, and it sounds like a lot if you think of it in that manner. But going to the next slide, again, if you look at it from just what are the different colors of money and what are you available to do, Jamie, if you go through, although the $517.8 million is staying there, you only have the availability to use general fund in any capacity you need. And then, going forward, the general stabilization is 17.9, and that represents that much. You've gotten to the point now, you are just now healthy. You have just reached that point where that's a good stabilization. Back in the day, before the recession hit, you were at $50 million there. So right now, you're at the cusp of it. Moving forward, Jamie. So going back to this sheet, in your spare time when you have nothing else to do, you can see how this all works out. But the main thing, if you flip one more page, the interesting thing is that in Manatee County, they have always provided a net budget. Now notice I went to the gross budget. But in Manatee County for I don't know how many years, they have always taken out internal service funds. They have taken out transfers because you're really taking it from one pocket and putting it in another, kind of doubling it up. And then they also pull out that cash reserve I just talked about. Now, that's how they have historically done it. I do not know of any other county or city that does. My recommendation next year, if you want to go to the total, let's just go to the total and don't do the net anymore. I mean, that's fine. Here's the reasoning. This form is required by the state of Florida. Manatee County augmented it and make it more restrictive by making it a net budget. So we're not violating anything. We're just presenting it a little bit different. But you're still presenting all the same numbers. You have a total budget on there, and if any person from any county and any city can go on this and find the exact same thing they can anywhere else. So Jamie, going forward, so this slide you remember from the last time we met. This defines your net budget. And really the way that you think about the net budget is that this is the amount of funding I'm using and how I'm spending it and living within my means. And this is how it basically looks. So on the revenue side, you can see as a whole, property taxes bring in $253.5 million, or right at 33.5%. Other taxes are at 8.8%. Charges for services, now that also includes your ambulance fees, that also includes your water, wastewater, your landfill fees. That's at $243.4 million. Intergovernmental revenues at 134.7, and license, permits, fines, miscellaneous, that rolls up into 58.5. So overall, that is the revenue source of $757 million. So where did you spend it? One of the largest places you spend it is public safety. The general government overall functions, you are spending 8.8. For public safety, which includes sheriff, EMS, and overall public safety, the animal control, all of those, 197.6. Physical environment is solid waste, utilities, and stormwater. That's why it ranks almost as high. Public transportation at 92.1. Human services, now this involves all your neighborhood services, economic development, healthcare, all your nonprofit agencies, your children. Those are all at $33 million. And then culture and recreation, which involves your parks, your property management, your civic center, your libraries at 32.3. Your capital outlay is at 40.7. That's where you're investing in your infrastructure. And then the remainder, which are transfers to other governments, we have to pay them gas taxes, certain items like that, that comes up to 64.9 for a total of $757 million. So to reiterate the overall of this presentation and what we were hoping to do is blend the two so that you truly see when you're doing the budget, you're bringing all the revenue you know and all the cash you have. And we go through the audited statements, and that's our starting point. So we estimate using that. Coming back on the outside, we get to the expenses and then the reserves at the end. You know, one of the nice items, and you saw as you met with us earlier this year, you met with the financial advisor, you met with, Dan Wolfson was kind enough to be there with us. You have an excellent relationship with the clerk and her staff and her team of CPAs, and they provide excellent support for us to make sure that we're all working and doing the best for Manatee County. And with that, I'll close.
Commissioner Whitmore.
Jan, the millage, I'm looking at this chart, and I know we had reduced the millage, but I thought I came in November of '06, and I think in '07, the millage was 7 something.
It was.
Was
It was up higher. You actually dipped it down a little bit, and then,
Okay, then we dipped it, so that was the year that we lowered it, was 2008.
yes.
Because of the recession, okay. Also, let's talk about this next year, but we are into the reserves of, we're in the building department, we've been living off the building permit fees and stuff, and we lowered our building permit fees to the public. So I know and I'd like us to talk about it this year, what's gonna happen? Are we gonna have to raise the rate? Are we gonna be able to live within the reserves, or
And if I may, we currently are doing a building fee study.
Oh, okay,
It is
good.
time to go back through and do that again. The goal of the study, it usually runs about 3 to 6 months. John O's probably much better at this than I am, but usually 3 to 6 months, and the goal being you align the cost with exactly what it takes to process the permits,
I believe
so
it's-
that you don't have
I think we're
extra.
Scheduled potentially in December to come back with some
Good.
preliminary information,
Great.
correct, John?
Yeah, because us having to comply with the new state laws and stuff, what are we gonna do? And we wanna make sure we give our business community, input and, to see what we're gonna do, how we can maintain it. It's kind of like an enterprise fund, but not really.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Well, okay, Commissioner Benak.
Yeah, only question I kind of see on the designated funds under the water and sewer operating utilities, the amount is pretty high, 27 million. So what causes that to be so high on the budget stabilization sheet?
On the budget stabilization sheet, so with the water utilities, they operate 10 years looking out. So when they're planning some of their items, some of their maintenance, not capital, but truly maintenance, is inside of there. Is Mike in the room? Did you want to expand on that anymore? So when they do their fees.
He's had enough of us.
Him enough today.
He's had enough today.
So when they go through and do their fee studies, they present their plan, their 10-year plan. This is what I need to accomplish within this time. So that's what that fund it builds for, and then they go through and use it. Just like with the impact fees, the water, there's a plant in the future, and we're building impact fees right now to save for it. So although it looks like at one point in time it seems a lot, if you look at the 10-year plan, it's not. That's where it falls into place.
Okay, but it's an operating fund, so that's why I was looking at it,
Yes.
so it looks
Yes.
hefty.
Okay, I have a couple questions. When you said, we realize we have all these different funds. From time to time, do we not borrow between those funds and pay an interest rate?
Yes, usually the only ones that you borrow in between, for example, you loaned tourist development money from the general fund. So the general fund loans the funds the other direction. It's usually, I'm not allowed to go to the tourist fund and borrow from it because it violates what it was collected for. The general fund is the main one. Now, also the unincorporated, if it benefits all of the unincorporated area, you can do the same with it. But you really don't want to loan from one to another. Dan, did you want to expand on that, or is that, no? That's good, okay.
Well, I would agree, but I think under the prior administration, I saw an awful lot of that coming through, that we were forever moving money back and forth between those funds. Right, Dan? Was that fairly accurate?
Yes.
Never mind, you don't need to go on the record with that.
Get out there, eh?
Yeah.
Well, but and the purpose of the question is that, God forbid that something tragic, and we burn through all of our reserves in the general fund, we burn through the stabilization fund, we burn through the $6.5 million in the disaster fund that we're now funding this year, that we could still potentially go to one of the other funds and borrow short-term till we figured out how to replenish all that.
And move forward healthy.
Healthy.
One of the things Dan just brought up, and probably what you're remembering, is oftentimes the general fund, if you're building projects, it's called the building fund, and that's when there's capital projects. The ones I think of that come to mind, P25 radio, the One Solution System, those things. If you were on the board back then, in 2016 we did a debt issuance to cover all that, but the months prior to it, we loaned money so that we could keep going until we got to the debt. So that's probably what you're remembering.
It was done a lot.
Now, would you envision, based on where we are this year, that if we continue to have the growth that we've had coming in during the next 12 months, that, perhaps next year we should be looking at millage decrease or some other, because to me, we have a lot of needs for the money, and, I'd like to see maybe, if we're gonna keep accumulating it, I'd rather see us spend it and give it more to maybe Parks and Rec or more to public safety than to just keep building up this rainy day fund.
I can tell you there'll always be a need. No, just as Sherry said, there's way more needs than we do have cash. If you're asking me what I think is going to happen in the next couple of years, I really think your government is in a nice spot in the state. I think you're going to continue growing. I think you're going to be healthy. I do think you just got to a healthy point where when we start the process next year for the budget, you'll have opportunities to say, I maybe want to fund this program, I maybe want to reduce this, I maybe want to do several things. But you're just now to the point where I feel like you just got your bond upgraded and you're very healthy. So in the future, yes, if there's continued growth, and if there's not, if we start recessing back, I feel like you've got a very good cushion right now to start. Did you want to elaborate?
Well, let me add too, we're building a new pool in Palmetto, the Lincoln Pool. We're expanding GT Bray for pickleball and tennis. We're building a new library. We're going to replace all of the area out at the John Marble. Those are just a few as picking. One of the things we've been talking about over the last 3 months is operating and maintenance. We're not prepared to fully staff any of those particular projects that we mentioned. The IST has been a wonderful thing for handling some of these projects that were on our list for the voters, that were things that, they were looking forward to utilize. But what we're trying to do, Jan, myself, and the directors, is make sure that you can operate those, you can keep them open. The Lincoln Pool it'll be a nice looking pool, but if we can only have it open 2 days a week, we haven't done our job for you. Same way with the libraries, same way with some of the other facilities. So as we plan, yes, what we think is that when we're back in front of you in January and February of this coming year, and we're looking at the closeout for the current year that we're in, we'll have a better picture on what you might be looking at for ¡21.
Good point.
And also, it would appear that we are going to spend down some of the reserves this year because of the
Yes.
capital improvement projects that we have going. I don't remember what the number, but
I think it's on one of the slides. I think it's roughly you're going down 600 million? I actually think, she's saying 600. I know that what you're spending out of your cash reserves, you're going down 30 million. I think that's what Commissioner Johnson's referring to.
right.
That the cash itself that you're starting the year with versus where you're gonna end, you're already spending down 30 million.
Right. Okay. I don't see anybody else, so I guess at this point we'll open it up to public comments. I've got 2 people signed up. Kathy Woolley, I guess? Yes, thank you. You good? Okay. And then Mr. Meehan. And I've agreed to give Mr. Meehan 5 minutes. He had not quite filled out the long form.
5 minutes worth of form, huh?
Right, so, you know,
If you can take
always
5
enjoy
minutes of
seeing
me.
you, so we'd like you to enlighten us
Mike
for
Meehan.
5 minutes.
Mike Meehan, citizen, Manatee County. I have several observations about the current state of Manatee County's income statement and balance sheet, which is how I look at things. I pay some attention to forecasts and balance sheets and estimates and projections, but the reality is the numbers that are produced by the clerk are the ones I pay attention to because they tell you what really has happened. So, to start off, last year the surplus for 2018 was $108 million. So you took in $108 million more than you spent in fiscal year 2018. That was 14.6% of the money that was collected, was not spent, was not utilized, and went into a money market fund. I don't know if that's a good use of the money that comes in, but that's where it went. The 15% millage cut that I'm projecting or requesting you to consider, you're going to get that money back in 2 years because you got 7.6% annual property appraisal appreciation. So in 2 years, their $35 million cut, which is represented by the 15% millage reduction, you're going to get all that money back in 2 years. So it's not gone. It's going to help out a lot of people. In Manatee County, 44% of the population is living in poverty or ALICE. I'm going to give you some actual numbers so you can chew on that a little bit. There's 16,120 households in Manatee County living in poverty. There are 46,816 households in Manatee County living in ALICE, which means they're basically living paycheck to paycheck. So if there's a millage cut of $35 million, I'm estimating that group of people will get an extra $200, $300 in their pocket. For that group of people, which are 62,936 households in Manatee County, that makes a difference to them. That's serious money to those people. And that's another way of evaluating the value of cutting the millage. There's also a negative fiscal effect that comes off this homestead exemption. Every year, your appraised value goes up 2%, whether you like it or not, because of the homestead exemption. And over a 5-year period, that's about a 10.4% increase in your appraised value. I looked at my property bill the other night and compared them, and that's about what it was. So that's a contractionary effect on Manatee County, that homestead exemption. So if you were to do the millage cut, as I'm suggesting, of $35 million, you are going to provide a fiscal stimulus to Manatee County because that $35 million is no longer collected by the county. It's going back into the economy of Manatee County. And let's say that $35 million is spent and it's a 7% tax rate. So the net benefit to Manatee County from that $35 million tax cut is $2.5 million. Or you can just keep it in a money market fund and make 2%, and that has no stimulative impact on Manatee County because it's not being spent. So by cutting the millage, you're generating positive economic activity for the people that are getting their money back. I'm going to give you just an analogy of how I look at revenues, how I look at the CIP plan, and how I look at reserves. And I'm going to put it in very simple terms. Let's say you're a taxpayer with a $50,000 income, and you're anticipating $50,000 worth of expenses for the year. So you're breaking even. You're ALICE. At the same time, your jalopy is wearing out, and you got $30,000 in a savings account, and you're going to use that money to buy a new car at some point during the year. But during the next 12 months, something happens. And maybe it's a positive thing. Maybe you got a bonus. Maybe your company was sold and you got some stock options, whatever. But let's just assume that $30,000 of extra money came into your pocket during that period. And also at the same time, let's assume that you're not spending as much as you thought you would. You know, maybe you're going to the boiler room instead of Madigan's. You didn't take that Viking River cruise ship this year, so your expenses are no longer 50, they're 40. So your revenues went up by 30,000 that you didn't anticipate, and your expenses went down by 10,000 because you didn't spend as much. So you're 40,000 to the good. Now, when it comes time to buy that car, are you going to take the 30,000 out of your savings account to buy the car? No. You don't need to. You've made $40,000, you can buy the $30,000 car. You have $10,000 left over, which you can then add to your savings account. This is exactly what's going on with Manatee County revenues. And this is the relationship that I see between the revenues coming in, the CIP, and the reserves. If the reserves were really being spent, then the reserves should go down, but they're not going down. They're going up. The reserves 5 years ago were under 300 million. Unrestricted cash was under 300 million. Now it's 623 million. So that's an analogy that I see as to how things are really working in terms of dollars and cents in Manatee County. Finally, on the subject of 20% reserves, I guess there's a statute or some kind of guideline, everybody's talking about 20% reserve. So let's take 20% reserve of what you spent last year, which is $631 million. That calls for a reserve based on 20% of about 125 million reserve. Well, you know, as of July 31st, your unrestricted cash is 623. So you got unrestricted excess cash reserves of almost $500 million. And that's holding to your 20% mandate. So my opinion is the reserve 20% rule works both ways. If you're under it, build it up. Be conservative and build it up to 20%. But if you're over it, right now, you're almost at 12 months operating expense with your reserves. I think you also have an obligation to drop those reserves down and start funding some of the county expenditures out of those reserves instead of the reserves just building up at very high rates each and every year. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. Is there anybody else from the public that would like to come down and talk? Seeing nobody, will close public comment. Commissioner Whitmore?
Yeah, I asked the clerk if
Oh.
they would come tonight, and also Dan, if he wants to come up too. I would, because, thank you, Mike, for bringing up what you do. I just don't, because from what we understand, some of the information that you're presenting is not the real picture, and you always refer to the clerk of the court, so I had asked them to come to explain how you feel about what's going on, regarding our credit ratings. You are our financial manager. You invest our monies. We don't even write our own paychecks. The clerk does. The clerk pays all the bills. We don't do any of that. So I would like some of the information that maybe you heard today to be corrected if you feel it needs to be. We get our paychecks online now, but you know what I mean. We used to get a paycheck when
It's
I
our
was.
investment policy.
Yeah.
She just executes it.
I know what it is.
So,
I know, well, I don't think,
waiting, she makes all the.
okay, but I don't
financial-
think September 17th at 6 PM that we are going to change our investment policy
Well,
tonight.
I'm not, but I just want to
Okay.
make sure the record's clear.
Well, I'm
Good
sure
evening.
she will.
Good evening, Commissioners.
Good evening.
Yeah.
How are you? Well, I won't ask that right now. I just wanted to address one thing that I just heard while it's on my mind onto the investments. And the Florida law, the law dictates a lot of what we do. We have CPAs, we have the government rules for accounting, and but the Florida law dictates what we can and can't do in a lot of cases. And one of those, many cases, is investments. And you have to protect, there are three basic principles. You protect the principal. That is first and foremost to be considered before anything. You prepare for liquidity. And why? Because when we invest that money, we have to draw down on it. Now, most of us don't come home and put our whole paycheck in an investment account and draw down. But the county, you have to, because you're collecting all that money at one time at the beginning of the year, and that's it. We are maximizing the return on our investments because we are only required, we are only allowed to put into short-term instruments because of that liquidity aspect. And then you maximize your return on investment at the end. That is the third principle. And that is because you are maximizing it by putting it into short-term instruments, which make it easy to draw down on to pay the bills. And that's what we do. And I see that activity going on all the time. I'm alerted when that goes on. My comments tonight, what I wanted to address, are not intended in any way to provide an opinion, to give you advice on how to vote, and nothing. I'm here to give you information. That's it. I'd be remiss, I feel, in my role as your comptroller if I did not come forward and say anything at all or give you considerations and different analyses to look at. Last week, we received a bond upgrade from an AA2 to a AA1. secured with non-ad valorem funds, and a AAA secured with ad valorem funds. One of the considerations of that increase, as stated by the bond agency when I was looking through their report to us, and I quote what they said in their consideration, "The stable outlook reflects the likelihood that the county will maintain healthy reserves and liquidity while managing population and tax base growth." I want to point out that there is you could read into that, there is a reliability in this statement. There's a presumption made in raising our bond rate that upon prudent management of the funds, that there is a reliability that we will continue this prudent management of funds, the likelihood that the county will maintain healthy reserves. I want to highlight that. That was a consideration in raising our bond rate. The bond rating agency also focused on our high level of financial flexibility, supported by ample reserves and liquidity, and enabling it to effectively manage challenges related to its coastal location, like hurricanes and storm-related flooding. Again, this is all in our bond rating. Another bond agency contributed their high rating to increased expectation of continuing financial resilience. And that describes how we came through that financial crisis. We were extremely resilient in that respect because of the preparation we put into that reserve. We are finally restored to the level of funding we were at 10 years ago, as Jan Brewer just mentioned. And remember the housing boom and the bubble, and things were going really well. Well, what if the board 11 years ago decided things are going so fantastic, let's just cut and dig into our reserves, cut the reserve, and spend all this money, cut the millage? We would have been in catastrophic circumstances during that Great Recession. We would have been, I know there were a lot of employees that lost their jobs, but it would have been far worse. We're talking doors closing. It would have been catastrophic, and I don't know that there would have been a quick answer other than to raise taxes if that had happened back then. We managed to come through that crisis without having to raise the millage rate, and that to me is outstanding. There's other factors to consider. Geography. We live in paradise, but it comes with a cost. High risks of hurricanes and flooding. We already have seen that this season, as it is with all the rain we had this summer, was an inordinate amount. Think of Michael. The Panhandle is still putting themselves back together. Katrina, Andrew, Dorian. What would have happened if Irma decided to hit us as expected, as a Category 4 or 5, and remained stalled off of our coast for 44 hours and pummeled us like that? The building we're standing in right now is, and Sherry can correct me maybe, we are projected at possibly a 5-foot flood. There's a 5-foot storm surge in this area alone. This building, you're going to have to work from somewhere, which means we have to triage all of our services and take them someplace else. How would you help citizens under less than desirable circumstances? And they will be needing help of all of us to navigate how to do this. The government doesn't have the luxury I shouldn't say luxury, we can't just shut down. We have to maintain and keep going. And somewhere, with people, with round-the-clock help, which costs money, you have to pay the employees that are still operating and continue those operations. I would remind you at the end of the fiscal year, it also coincides with the peak of hurricane season. That's when our budgeted accounts and money have been spent down for the year. We get one paycheck at the beginning of the year, and our talented finance staffs do a remarkable job with their projections. I have an exceptionally talented team of CPAs, as does the county, and we work very closely with them. I also want to point out other factors that are beyond our county's control that will trickle down eventually to us if we aren't too prudent with the money, the reserves, the national and international conditions. Ironically, last week, along with our rating increase, there was this crisis now that could potentially be a crisis for fuel with relating to an increase in fuel prices. Think about how that'll affect every product that's delivered or even made with petroleum. And Federal Reserve, they've increased the rate not that long ago, only now to be lowering them again. And Brexit, when people figure out what that's going to do or what that's about, it will have a trickle-down effect if there's no agreement in place, possibly on trade, and that will have far-reaching effects. And then there's China and U.S. tariff issues that are keeping some instability in the markets as well. All of these things are things to consider. Today, the Florida Economist released their report on the state level, and they don't go so far. They don't say recession, but they say we're in for a significant slowdown in 2020 and 2021. I heard some unequivocally incorrect information that someone had claimed that we have a 90% reserve. Not that I know of. I'm not aware of that at all. We do not. It was interesting because the terminology used also by the same person was profit. And there is no profit. As an attorney, I was trained to spot those inconsistencies. And when you start talking about government accounting and profit in the same sentence, that's an impossibility. You're not going to see profit on any government statement. What you're going to see, we operate on fund accounting. The focus is accountability, not profitability. That's the private sector. And we're nonprofit. We're government. The purpose is to track assignments of funds. And between the county and my office, we have a team of exceptional CPAs and finance staff who have been in the industry of government accounting many years. As your clerk and comptroller, I've been certified by the Florida Supreme Court at close to 400 hours on clerk's responsibilities, which includes comptroller functions as well, for those of us who hold that role. And the training touches on everything we do as clerks, including our role to the board. I am in no way encouraging you to vote one way or another. I only want to make certain as your comptroller that you're fully informed and relying on appropriate trained and certified professionals to make your analysis. Thank you.
Thank you, Angel. Very well said.
That's good.
Commissioner Bellamy.
I want a copy of that.
I know.
We want a
Very,
copy.
very, very, very powerful. So when you talk about stimulating the economy and potentially impacting Alice families, obviously that's an interest of mine because of some of the needs in our immediate community. But some of the notes that I've written down and I've collected, that we have a balanced budget with increasing service levels right now based on the things that's presented. And we've addressed all of the constitutional requests, but still the requests, and I've heard this a couple of times from Commissioner Ball as well as Commissioner Johnson, that we need to look at a potential millage cut. And I'm not necessarily sure what that looks like, but it sounds interesting to me if it could potentially stimulate our economy and impact the Alice family. So here's where I am, and I did a little bit of work over during the retreat and conversing with some individuals. And for me, where I stand, and this is probably the very first motion and probably the last one that I'll make too, is I want to make a motion for a workshop in February or March, and that doesn't really matter, to come up with a strategy to potentially cut the millage. In other words, if you're looking at all the departments, like the sheriff department has 52.7%, and other constitutions 10.2, 11.6. When you're talking about making a cut, all right, first of all, we would have to inform them, and they need to be aware of the potential cuts, and we need to be considerate the potential impact. So I think we need to look at that. Some people are requesting from up here from the dais as well as an individual in the public. So how does that look? Can we discuss that at a workshop? You all probably already have discussed it at a workshop, so I just want to be brought up to speed to look at it, to look at it with the intent to come up with a strategy. Now, that's nothing against where we are right now as far as having a balanced budget and being ready to move. But my motion is for a workshop in February for a strategy to potentially cut it.
Second.
Okay, we've had a motion and a second to, I guess, put together a workshop in February to potentially look at a millage cut probably for the year 2021.
I would ask Sherry if that's early enough, because they're starting budget in February. Would it need to be in December or January?
No, the time's
It's just the
appropriate.
right time.
It's when we started this year. It's an opportunity to look at it at that point.
Okay, so I guess we'll get to see Commissioner Benak.
Yeah, interesting. I don't have a problem with talking about it and how that would happen. But I heard so many things, and I can't, I have to go through these things that I heard because I heard them wrong. And I want someone, whether it be Jan or Angel, to respond, and I just want to make sure. So first was.
Is it on the motion, or should we what do we do? Are you talking about his motion? Because he made
No,
a
it's
motion
about,
and a
it's about the
second.
budget overall.
Oh,
I
we have a
don't.
motion.
I-
Okay.
I guess so I wanted to clarify all the things that we heard about what might be leading up to this motion. So I gotta say it's related.
So it'd be
okay?
discussion on the motion.
So, it has to be related because we're talking about cutting the millage and how we would get there and why. So first thing I heard was, why did we take we took in 108 million more than was, spent? And that was something that Mr. Meehan said, and my presumption is, and I would like Angel or Jan to say this, is yeah, because you take in all the revenues at once and then you have to spend it down over the year. But a lot of that is money that was taken in and is on capital, long-term projects that are gonna be spent over 5 years. Is that correct?
What I believe he's referring to is between the 2 years is the increase just between the same point between the 2 years. If you issue debt, if you, like the crossover funding where you got $50 million, that's gonna play into that the same way. That falls down to the same amount. So overall, we have grown over time, and you can see those in the interim financial statements and the audited statements. It is there. We are growing. The budget is reflecting what you have the availability to maneuver in with all that funding flowing over.
And Angel did a great job
Great
of
job.
clarifying this, so some of these questions I wrote down before she spoke, so. And then a 7.6% annual property appraisal increase. I don't think that's true, but
I do have something that's interesting. Hang on. So, the CPI over the last, since 2013, actually was about a 10% cap over those years, each year going up. Remember, you're capped by either 3% or the lower of CPI. So over those since 2013, that has gone up that much. Jamie, can you push back up the property values, the very first one? So what's interesting in this to me is that between 241, between the 24.1 million and the 38.8, that your values have gone up 53%. You've only been taxed on 10, but your house theoretically has gone up that much. So that is why Save Our Homes exists, so that it keeps down. But you are receiving the benefit that the value of the property you have now is 53% higher than it was way back in 2013 or 12.
And then about the sales tax, so we don't get 100% return on our sales tax, is that correct?
100% return on sales, on infrastructure sales tax?
Sales tax, no, any sales tax. Sales tax goes up
Oh,
with the
for the
state.
state?
Yeah,
I believe our sales tax in here is 7%?
7%.
7%? It is, you are given an allocation through the state of Florida as to what you have. You have an availability to option for some additional sales taxes that occur. You did one with the infrastructure sales tax. They voted on
right.
that.
But what I'm saying is every penny of sales tax that is collected in Manatee County, does every penny come back to Manatee County?
No, part of it
That's
stays in the
what I
state.
thought.
Part of it stays in the state.
Oh, we have to have some way to fund this state, so,
That's
yeah,
how
I
they
mean, we
function.
don't have
There is
an
an
income tax. So
allocation.
I heard that all that sales tax is coming back to Manatee County, and that raised my flag. No, I don't think that's true.
No, ma'am.
All right, and regarding your motion, I want to be very careful. I applaud the idea of looking at the issue of income inequality, the issue of Alice. We know that is a significant issue, but I think it's incorrect to assume that the way to solve this problem is to cut the millage.
that's not what
I
he
would be
said.
very, it is my opinion,
say that.
my opinion, that I didn't say he said that. This is my opinion. I heard this come from Mr. Meehan. I didn't hear it come from Reggie. This is what I heard, because I think you have to remember what the function of government is and who does pay those higher millage costs. You know, government is the one that provides the safety net in many cases for people that are living in poverty or living with Alice. So the idea that simply by cutting someone's millage that we're going to improve the quality of life for those people that are, living at the Alice level, I don't think that's an equal, from my opinion, I don't think those are the folks that are gonna benefit from the millage cut. I just don't. I mean, I'm thinking, I'm not an accountant, I don't have all this at the top of my head, but that doesn't mean I don't wanna talk about it. I said at the last meeting, I don't want to have a large surplus that does affect even people like me that aren't Alice, quite frankly. It's not fair. That's not fair. But I don't think you can make that direct connection. That's my caution on just the discussion that we're at today. Simply from what I heard from Mr. Meehan, that was going to be the answer. I don't think it is. I think maybe there might be other programs that might be, or things that we can do, but I would caution us to assume that there's a direct connection. Maybe I have to refer to my banker friend to help me explain what I mean.
We'll work on that in the work session.
Okay.
Commissioner Ball.
I find it utterly amazing. Commissioner Benek, I do agree with some of the things you said, but I will say this. I appreciate Mr. Mahan taking his time to come in here and talk to us. He's a good citizen. He's put in a lot of effort and a lot of work. Whether or not we up here look at him and say we agree with you or not, he deserves the utmost respect for coming here and doing what he does. And I, for one, appreciate it. I think we're making this more complicated in some ways than we have to. We know, this board, we had a meeting today on stormwater fees, didn't we? We know that's coming. They told, September the 24th, we're going to be asked to increase tax and basically it's a tax on a stormwater fee. Do we need to handle stormwater? Yes. I'm not saying the need's not there. I'm just saying that the residents of this county are going to be asked to pay more money. You're also going to be looking at a mobility fee. Do I understand where the county's looking at with that? Yes. But again, it's a tax. And the residents of this county are once again going to be asked to pay more money. You talk about millage rates. I think Jan, or maybe it was our clerk, I'm not sure now, to be honest, I'm kind of fading, it's been a long day. One of them said, and they were absolutely correct, the value, our revenues have increased because the home values are going up. The millage rate's the same. Now, yes, I think one of them, I think it might have been Jan, or maybe Angel, I don't know, said, we might have a recession in 20 or 21.
Right.
Well, gee, it's an election year, isn't it?
Next year.
That's 2020. Everything slows down when you're having a presidential election. And then what happens right after it's over? It starts going back up again. I don't think we're going to see much of a recession myself. I think this country is rocking, economy-wise. So it seems to me that if you want to be fair to the residents who do pay your salaries, and everybody that works for county government, I might add, be fair. How much more do you want to tax them? The county is not in a position where we're hurting. We have, for the first time ever, thanks to our great new administrator, we now have a fund in case of a hurricane. We never had that before. Our stabilization fund, it's increasing. I don't think it's done that for a while. Thank you very much, Ms. County Administrator. So my point is, the county's doing well. We should be looking at how we can help our residents do well. This isn't about increasing all of the money to do everything we want to do. We're not talking about that much money. We're not talking about taking away from anything that we can possibly want to do. Utilities is still going to be taken care of. The building department, the sheriff's office, everybody's happy. We got a great budget this year. It's amazing at the money that was found. And I thank you again for that. So, if you're going to look at your residents who vote you in office and expect you to look out for them, if you're going to look at taxing them twice more this year, then, you know, you better look out for them, what they're already paying. You know, that's your job, is to look out for the taxpayer. And yeah, I mean, I'll admit, I don't have a lot, you know, that's being affected by Alice, and I understand that. But, you know, at the same time, I do have a lot of couples that live on Social Security. So, you know, it really hits all of us. It doesn't matter where we are in this district. So for me, I second that motion, and I applaud Commissioner Bellamy. I didn't know he was going to do it. I applaud you for bringing it up. I do think it's something we need to get serious about while we can. Is it to say we might not ever have to increase our millage? I don't know. I can't answer that. But I know right now God has blessed us. So give your residents a little bit of something instead of always asking for more and more and more. And I'm not meaning to preach, and I'm sorry, but, you know, I mean, we can make it as difficult and look into it as much as we want, but, you know, we're not talking much money, and I understand. I look at the clerk of the court, I talk to her all the time. I have the utmost respect for what she says, and she's right. And Dan Wolfson, I'm telling you, I don't like it when he gives me a mean look, and he did. I respect him immensely. So my point is, we don't have to be talking millions upon millions of dollars here. You know, I mean, I don't know how much the stormwater fee, you know, we heard today what we're looking at. And yes, those in the incorporated area don't have to worry about it. It's
I
just
already
the
pay
rest
it.
of us.
It's 2005.
I realize that's a lot of, I pay a stormwater fee right now too in the unincorporated. So, you know, it is what it is. Let's be fair and look out for the residents. That's all I'm saying. Thank you.
Okay, and, you know, I'll just weigh in on, I think it's a good motion. I'd like to, you know, assuming that it passes, you know, I think we really need to look at the overall picture of the finances of the county. We need to look at, is 20% too much? Is 15 too little? Is 17 right? Do we need, you know, not just, you know, cutting millage, but I think it's a whole discussion across the board because, you know, I'm sorry, I come from the private sector. Government, you know, we're not here just to keep collecting money and putting it into our checking and savings account. And, you know, and I kind of think in the short period I've been up here, that's all I've seen us do is consistently, you know, put money away. I understand 2008 was a bad year. It was a bad year for the whole country. You know, we weren't unique here in Manatee County. And we are unique because we're a county that's growing. It's been, you know, the finances have been handled, you know, very, very professionally. And now we're at a point where we're in, you know, doing even better. But now, you know, based on, you know, again, this morning, as Vanessa says, here we are, and now we're going to start taxing the people some more. We're going to put in a mobility fee. We're going to, or a fee. I don't care if you want to call it a tax or a fee. I'm going to still call it a tax. But, you know, a lot of people call it a fee. Between the mobility fee and the stormwater fee, do we need them? Absolutely. However, you know, maybe we can minimize those fees if we sit there and we look back at our reserves and say, hey, maybe we could take some of them back out or move it to a lower level. I seriously doubt it's going to affect our bond rating. The last time I talked to our bond counsel, he said he felt we could easily bond up to $250 million and never miss a beat on our rating. You know, so I would hope we would never borrow that much money.
Wait a minute, Dan's having a heart attack. Wait a minute.
You know, but I think, you know, we're in good shape in that area. So, you know, I would encourage us to do a work session. I think Jan can certainly head it up and welcome for, you know, Dan or Angel to lend their expertise as well so we can really look at, you know, where we want to go with the county over the next 2 to 3 years and get all these different things on our little wish list funded, if possible, and if not, then look at what the options are. So, Commissioner Benak?
Yeah, and I'm certainly going to support this because I think there's a lot of misconceptions. This idea that lowering the millage isn't going to take millions out. It will. It'll take millions out. Where will it take it out from? We need to discuss that. Where's the millions going to come out from? Is it going to come out from public safety? Is it going to come out from operating funds on all these new capital projects so that we can't run them? Or is it really going to just take out of reserve so that the bond rating could potentially be affected and we can't plan for the future. We need to answer these questions. We cannot make assumptions without
Why we need a
having the
workshop.
discussion. And I especially want it because a mobility fee is paid as an impact fee. It is not a tax. It's paid by new development. It's not paid by taxpayers. You need to understand what a mobility fee is before you say it's a tax paid by the residents of Manatee County. It is not. So stop saying it.
Can I reply, Mr. Chairman? Your state legislators this past session wanted to change impact fee to impact tax because they said, yes, it is nothing more than a tax.
It's not yet.
So you can say the word fee, you can say tax. It's a tax. It is the same thing. So I just wanted to bring, that was Tallahassee, not me.
Okay, Commissioner Servia?
Thank you.
You sure you want to?
I just want to say a couple of words of appreciation. So I really appreciate Jan's very clear presentation on a very complex subject. It is incredible to me that such a huge budget can be broken down in ways that we can understand it. So thank you for that. I want to thank Angel. Angel, thank you for your comments. They were excellent, and they helped me to understand some things I had questions on. And I want to thank Mr. Meehan for being here, because it takes, for a citizen to spend their time to research and analyze something as complicated as this budget and come forward with ideas, I really appreciate that. And I've talked with him and met with him several times, and it has made me look into other questions and ask other questions. And so it helps me to fully understand what we're doing. I agree with Commissioner Baugh that we need to be concerned about our residents. I am. I have some of the neediest residents in Manatee County, right up there with Reggie. And my residents need sidewalks, and they need lights, and they need flood mitigation when the rains come. And they need child support services, and they need. They need.
They need to be able to buy food.
So I'm willing to talk about the millage reduction. I'm willing to talk about the budget as often as everybody wants to, because it's a very important thing that we should be discussing a lot, and we do spend a good part of our year talking about it. But yeah, let's do a workshop and discuss it some more. That's fine. I do feel like we're finally in a healthy place that brings stability to the county, and that's very meaningful to me too. I'm with all of you. I don't think that the government should have a huge savings account and not do anything with it, but I don't think that's the case. I think that we have the stability that we need in case of some unforeseen circumstance. Yeah, things are great right now, but I don't know what next year brings. And so I appreciate having that stability. So those are my comments before we vote. But I want to thank you all for the great discussion. And for our staff, I'm so thankful. Thank
Okay.
you.
Commissioner Trace?
I'd like to call the question.
Second.
Okay, we've got a motion to call the question by Commissioner Trace, seconded by Commissioner Whitmore. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Okay, that passed 7-0. Next will be the motion that was put on the floor by Commissioner Bellamy, seconded, I believe, by Commissioner Baugh. Maybe you should read that back, would be very helpful.
Motion was made by Commissioner Bellamy for a work session in February or March to come up with a strategy to potentially cut the millage.
Okay, we've got the motion, and the second, we'll now open it up for public comment. Is there anybody from the public that would like to discuss the concept of a workshop in February or March, or as early as possible? Seeing nobody come forward, we'll close public comment. All those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, motion passes 7-0. Moving on to item number 4, Jan, I think.
Yes, sir. I do need to read one thing per statute before we go and to place into the record. The aggregate millage rate for the Manatee County Board of County Commissioners for fiscal year 1920 is 6.8792, and the change from the rollback aggregate millage rate of 6.6083 for the operating millage is hereby determined to be a 4.1% increase. Again, there is no increase in the overall tax rates. So before you, sir, to finish, there are several motions that we need to approve.
Okay, that's 4, so we'll move on to 5 is the first is resolution. I need a motion.
Move that we adopt Resolution B 20004, setting the final millage rates fiscal year 2019 to 220. I assume I cannot make both motions at the same
Second.
time?
Correct.
Okay.
Somebody seconding?
Carol
Carol
did.
did.
Oh, I'm sorry. So we have a motion and a second to adopt Resolution B 20004. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, motion passes 7-0.
Adoption of Resolution B 20005, annual budget for Manatee County for fiscal year 2019 to 2020.
Second.
I'll give it to Betsy. How's that? It was a close call.
It was a close call.
So fair.
A motion by Commissioner Trey, seconded by Commissioner Benak, to adopt Resolution B-20-005. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, motion passes 7-0.
Adoption of Resolution B 20006, budget for Manatee County Dependent Special Taxing Districts for fiscal year 2019-2020.
Second. I was waiting for somebody else to do it.
I was lost, I'm sorry.
Or, I thought Vanessa did it.
Okay, we've got a motion by Commissioner Trey, seconded by Commissioner Whitmore to adopt Resolution B 20-006. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, motion passes 7-0.
Oh, you want a motion on the next one? Number 60, or adoption of Resolution R 19135 to adopt a 5-year capital improvement plan and policy regarding the administration of the 5-year capital improvement plan for the fiscal year 2020 to 2024.
Second. Question, Mr. Chairman, on the CIP?
Yes.
And I'm really not sure about this. Can we have discussion after this as far as taking something off the CIP or adding? Can
We'd have
that
to
still
amend
throughout
it.
the year
Yes,
take
we'd have to
place?
amend it.
Absolutely.
You'd have to amend
Okay.
it.
You can do that.
Just have
All
to
right,
amend
just
it.
wanted to make sure, because I'm gonna be coming at you.
Okay.
Saying that.
Okay, we've got a motion from Commissioner Trace on that one, seconded by Commissioner Benak to approve Resolution R 19135. However, prior to that, since we have not discussed it, we do need to, I believe, open that up for public. If there's anybody from the public that would like to come down and talk about the CIP project. Seeing nobody, we will close public comment. As I said, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, motion passes 7-0.
Mr. Chair, I had pushed my button, but I was waiting. You took me off twice since then, but
I'll take you off
I
again.
voted for the motion for Reggie. What'd you say?
Take you off.
I'm not in the mood. I voted for Reggie's motion, but I am not totally, and I know most here won't either. I'm not gonna jeopardize our public safety. I don't expect the population to go down next year. So reducing the millage rate, if it affects public safety or the health and human services, I probably wouldn't support it. And again, I've never heard Angel speak like she
So
did
firmly
before.
and so
And
direct.
I don't know if you wrote it, but I
Right.
would love to have that, because that was a lot of good information, and I don't care if it's handwritten, but, I think you definitely need to be at our table, because, you've been watching out for us for a long time, and I think you need to be part of our table. So I will definitely be okay with this work session. It doesn't mean that I 100% support it. We're supposed to be discussing it and what it would take. You know, if we do this, what would we lose if we lose anything? So I just wanted to say that. And I wanted to thank everybody here you guys have been going nuts. I've seen you all harassed, walking around. You knew this was coming. I want to thank Jan's staff and all the new ones that have come on board. I just want to thank all of you for all the hard work you've done. I know this is like the highlight of your year. You've been working since February. Now you've reached the finish line, so thank you.
Commissioner Benak.
And I just want to applaud Reggie for setting a goal for, that we should look for cutting the budget. I think that's fabulous.
Yeah, me too.
I don't think there's anything wrong with that, as long as we get good information and can make
Correct.
good decisions.
Exactly.
So I want to applaud you for setting that goal as we start out in our budget, and I don't know where you guys will be. You guys will probably be,
Be here?
way down the line past us.
They're not
But,
going anywhere.
But I think it's great that you've set that bar, so we'll see where we go with it.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, with that, thank you all for coming. Great, have a nice evening. We're adjourned.